Hello and welcome again, everybody. Another great session of the Remote Work Life Summit. And I'm really proud actually today to welcome Sarah Sutton with me. Sarah Sutton, she's the founder and chief executive officer of FlexJobs. FlexJobs is their strapline is it's a better find a way or find a better way to find work, and essentially it's a job service that specializes in professional opportunities that enable people to work flexibly on a remote basis, on a part-time basis, on a freelance basis. So, Sarah, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Alex.
And yeah, it's a real pleasure to have you here. And I think it was important to have you here today because you, as far as I have understood, I've been following Flex Jobs for a number of years, and I've been following you as well. Uh, you to me are if somebody is looking for a flexible job or a remote job, for example, Flex Jobs is the go-to place to get that opportunity. And you've been in the actual market yourself for a number of years, and I just really had to get you here to understand a bit more about you, a bit more about Flex Jobs and the sort of opportunities that it can offer to our community. So I just want to dive in, and I really want to find out first of all, Sarah, can you tell us a bit about you and how you got to where you are now?
Sure. And thank you for the kind words, and we're really happy to have been in the market as long as we have. Uh, the quick and dirty for me is I actually have been in the online employment industry pretty much since the beginning. I started my first entry level or my first job company in '95. We had the first online entry level job database for college students and graduate students, which we sold to Korn Ferry International in 2000. So my background goes quite deep, and I've been in this market for a long time, having seen both what technology has brought to the job search experience and in positive ways, and also what are the kind of more negative ways. So after that experience and kind of fast forward, I was actually pregnant with my first child, and I was looking for opportunities that would allow me to stay in my professional career path while also having some kind of flexibility to be available as the kind of hands-on mom I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started looking at the landscape of what was available, I quickly realized how frustrating it was. Not that these jobs didn't actually exist, because I knew they did. I had held remote jobs in the past. I had held flexible schedule jobs in the past. But what I was frustrated about was that it was so buried. These good opportunities were so buried. They were like needles in a haystack. So for an average job seeker who is looking for these opportunities, I also put myself in their shoes. As I wasn't an average job seeker, I came into it with years of experience of running a job site, knowing the market really well. And so I figured if I was having that big of a challenge, I imagined others were. And in researching that, millions of people want and need work flexibility, is what I found. It wasn't just a mom issue. This is definitely, it's a freelancing issue. It's a millennial. It's a retirees wanting more flexibility for part-time work, perhaps. It's an issue of people who live in rural and economically depressed areas where they don't have job markets to support their talents. It's issues for people like military spouses who have to move regularly and lose their career path every couple of years and at very little notice in many cases. There's a lot of reasons, people with health issues. I could go on, but there's a lot of reasons why people want and need work flexibility, such as remote and as well as flexible schedules and as you mentioned, freelance and part-time. But I really wanted to create a solution to the problem that I was experiencing. And so we've been doing this for 12 years. And yes, we've definitely had the chance to see how the market has grown from when remote was really considered very fringe to, while it's not nearly as widespread, it's adopted in such a formalized, widespread way, meaning that companies don't offer it as visibly as I think they should, and as readily as actually it's already apparent that their workers are working remotely, but they don't acknowledge that. Mm-hmm. But it's grown dramatically in the last 12 years. So flexibility is much more of a norm now.
And yeah, that strapline again, I mean, your strapline is find a better way to work. And for me, I personally, speaking as a father myself, it has been a better way for me to work. But like you also alluded to as well, flexible work and remote work is not something that is new, but it's a lot more in the spotlight now than it has been. Is do you know any particular reason why? Is there any sort of explanation as to why it's so on vogue now? Would you say?
Well, there's lots of different, I use the word trends lately, because I don't believe these are trends that are going away. I think these are fundamental workplace shifts that are happening, and have been happening for some time. Technology being the first and foremost. We all use our phones, laptops, computers to work from home. And I think that that's something, or to work remotely, not sitting at a desk in an office as the only place we get our work done. And so for the technological shifts, that's one big component. The other is that the dynamics socioeconomically and the way of family structures has changed dramatically in the last 30, 40 years, 50 years. There are far more dual income families. By far and large, the majority of families are dual income and or single parent families. So that challenge of juggling work and life is much more acute. So I think that that's a big issue. I'd say globalization in general, the opportunity to work and travel much more readily is something that, again, with the technology available, is happening, but also because talent is dispersed. And the competitiveness for good talent is really heightened right now. So you need to look outside of the most obvious places, and remote allows you to do that. It allows you to hire the best person for the job regardless of geography if you're open to it. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a lot of different reasons. And it goes on and on, but there's just a lot that supports being smart and forward thinking in this area for companies, retaining good people. I mean, I think that area as the market, and we've been flowed in our history being, we launched right before the recession. So we've seen different trends in who needs what more. And right now, companies need people more than people need companies in certain ways. And so right now, to recruit and retain people, you need to offer flexibility. It's seen as a very big benefit.
Mm-hmm. No, it definitely is. And you've been described as the queen of remote work. Is that's something that I guess that's not a title you gave yourself, but it's
or do I encourage anyone to call me that? No. Yeah, an article, I've been doing this for a long time, and an article used that term a while ago. It was partially in the I've had a lot of different labels or comparisons in this area, particularly when Yahoo banned telecommuting. At the time, I would get a lot of attention as the antithesis to that, or that
yes.
the anti that, basically.
Yes.
And I think that there are areas where I've been more visible and vocal in remote work for a long time. And I'm very proud to be an advocate for it. Again, it's not just because I believe it's for moms. I believe it's actually something that is smart for companies. I believe it's smart for employees and workers. I think it's smart for our environment. I think that there's a lot of environmental benefits to this. I think there's a ton of benefit to remote work. And so will I spend a good amount of my time, and am I happy to evangelize it and to sing its praises? Absolutely.
And I think we need you as an evangelist. We need more people like you as well, because I think it's like you said. I think people who do remote work get typecast, and it perhaps the benefits therefore are perhaps are not as well understood if that is the case. So we need you to sort of be that beacon, and like I said, be more like you as well. And
there's a lot of historical stigmas with remote work.
Yes.
That we have to overcome, and that's from both sides, from workers and from workers and society, as well as certainly from employers. And I think that they're based in a lot of lack of understanding, or just kind of misguided conclusions on how we work and how we work today versus 20, 30, 40 years ago. But for me, working from home is, it's focused on productivity and engagement. For me, I'm much more actually productive at working from home than I oftentimes in an office, at least at this stage in my life. And I also think that hybridization of the workforce is a very important issue, that remote is fantastic, but it actually doesn't work for everyone. Different kinds of work flexibility are equally as important, if less little sexy in the press or media or what have you. But flexible schedule or part-time schedule with a professional job are just as important for many people in their lives, whether again they have health issues or working parents or caretaking of older parents or whatever the issues are. But there's a lot of different kinds of flexibility that can allow individuals to stay in the workforce in ways that they weren't able to and contribute to their financial well-being, but also pay attention to the important things in their lives, which only help to strengthen our communities and culture and society. So it's a long-term investment. It's very cyclical, in my opinion.
And you mentioned, I mean, that for me, productivity and that engagement bit is something that I can really understand that. But is there anything, and you mentioned quite a few things in terms of how it suits different segments of the community. Is there anything particular about remote work that you particularly love?
A lot. I mean, I think first and foremost in my day-to-day life, it's really important for me to be with my kids and my friends and family, but to be the kind of member of my personal community is really important. And childhood, being a parent, parenthood, I guess, has really driven my story in substantial ways, because it has brought to a head the conflict that can happen when you don't have flexibility. I'm fortunate in that I've been able to carve out a dedicated workspace in my home. It's relatively dedicated, actually. My kids' desks are in here too now. They weren't when they were younger, and now they're older, and it's okay. But we have, I know that I can work in a focused, quiet space, which is not something. That doesn't work for everybody. But for me, being able to be fluid and run to the school and pick them up if I need to, if they're sick, or take them to a doctor's appointment in the middle of the day, or be able to know they're doing their homework in the other room while I'm working. Like, there's just parts that are incredibly beneficial to me, and have, beyond children, I guess I would also say things like exercise, working out, being able to eat healthy. For me, I have a garden, so in the summer I love going out to my garden and getting my lunch, making a salad and things like that, which are incredibly valuable to me and my quality of life. So then the time savings associated with all that as well, not commuting. I believe in the environmental benefits of remote work immensely, and so not commuting is huge to me. It's also wear and tear on cars, wear and tear on the infrastructure of our cities and states in terms of the roadways. It's certainly the pollution and the gas consumption, especially during rush hour. So there's a number of areas for me. I'm not as wasteful. I mean, I don't go out to get coffee everywhere in cups. I use my own cups. I make my own, there's just a lot of different kind of small benefits that add up immensely. So remote work, I would have a very difficult time going back to being in an office, certainly in a substantial amount of time.
Yeah, I think everybody I've spoken to, even those who are new to it, are just saying that, once you're a remote worker, you never really want to go back. Obviously, if it suits your personality and it suits the way that you work, you don't really want to go back because of all those things that you mentioned. And I can really, again, I've got children myself, and being able to drop them off at school and pick them up and being part of their lives is just, it's something that really should happen anyway. You should be part of your children's lives.
Well, we need it. We look around at our country and the world, and there's a intent. A lot of that starts with families and with how we take care of each other and how we teach each other. And if we dedicate the right time to being involved in our kids' educations, or caring in our community, volunteering in our community, or reaching out to the neighbor who needs help, there's all these areas that actually it's not unrelated. And being able to be an involved community member ultimately benefits us all, in my opinion. And so, and I think that there's different stages of life too. When I was younger and out of college or doing my first company, I was thrilled being in an office. I loved it. It was novel, for one, but it was fun. You had the social element. You go grab a drink after work.
Yeah.
You'd have the ping pong table. We had all the fun stuff. And there's some really wonderful elements to that too, especially if you derive your social life from your workplace. But different stages of life are quite different and don't have the same needs. And I think that that's really important. That's kind of where the flexibility in general comes in for me. That this isn't one size fits all. It's not even one size fits all for a person. It's actually a life cycle. And being open to that as an employer gives companies an edge to again, recruit and retain people.
Now, again, yes, and I think you mentioned some of the community aspects. I was doing an after-school club at my local school, and there was no way I would have been able to do that had I been in my 9 to 5, or there was times when I was working till 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night. There's no way I would have been able to contribute to those things that you mentioned. So there are just so many great benefits, and I think there are still a lot of people though who I think working remotely or genuine remote opportunities are too good to be true from different standpoints. So from a career standpoint, from a lifestyle standpoint, and I've noticed there are lots of people out there who have been victim to quite scammy opportunities that have perhaps led them down a path that is a bit sort of a bit dubious. What examples can you give, Sarah, to actually demonstrate that it is possible to build, obviously other than yours, that it's possible to build a career out of working remotely?
I think you've touched on something really important that most people, maybe not some of your savvy audience, I think that in general, even if you're a remote worker and you talk to somebody, they're like, you can do that remote, really? Do you really work? There's a real skepticism of what remote working is and how professional it is. It can be incredibly surprising. There's legitimate work from home and remote jobs in pretty much all professional industries. We have over 50 career categories on our site. We've entry level to executive, part-time to full-time, freelance to employee. So there's a real range of opportunities, and they can be in anything from more traditional fields like writing, sales, web and IT, being a developer remotely. But there's also, we've seen remote neurosurgeon jobs. We've seen remote golf instructor jobs. We've seen certainly teaching, lawyers, doctors. You have all of these that actually can be done remotely. The remote neurosurgeon job has always been a funny one. We've seen 2 of them actually in the industry, so it's not often. But it's usually hospitals that are in a location that's difficult to recruit. One was in Nevada, and it was in a relatively small town, and they just probably didn't have a whole big pool of remote neurosurgeons around. So they were recruiting out of state or open to it, but you'd fly in for surgeries. But so much of medicine nowadays, it's actually the number 1 category for these job opportunities, although, again, it's very diverse. But so much of medicine is digital nowadays. Telephone nurses, case managers, medical transcription, all kinds of different things. So,
yeah. Well, I've not heard of the neurosurgeon example. That's something that is certainly new to me. But yeah,
that was a good one.
No, it's amazing. Like I said, the expanse of opportunities that are available now, and I really encourage people to go over to flexjobs.com and have a look and just really understand that this is real and it's here to stay. And there are people that are building great careers, and they're not people necessarily working from home in their pajamas. They're professional people who are really sort of setting up something really nice, not only for themselves but for their families, and all of those things that Sarah mentioned, interacting with community and everything. All those benefits are there to be seen. So have a look at flexjobs.com. And Sarah, for you, what are the signs? Because again, I mentioned to you before that lots of people that I've spoken to have been victim to scams. And it's really horrible to hear that people are actually being asked for huge sums of money, are being scammed out of huge sums of money, with the promise that a job is at the end of that. What signs, Sarah, have you seen, or do you know that an opportunity might be a scam?
Yeah, this is really important, Alex. And I think that, even if you are a savvy remote worker, there was a woman years ago who she ran a remote work blog, a telecommuting blog. And so she involved in this area. And she ended up writing a post years into this confessing that she had been scammed. And this is, again, somebody who's very savvy. So this is not, most people think of scams as that they'll be really obvious. And that's true in many cases. So the obvious things would be, promise of a lot of pay, like an exorbitant amount of pay for very little work. Something where you really don't need any skills, but you make a lot of money. There's traits of the ad itself. Are there a lot of exclamation marks? Is the punctuation poor? Are there all caps everywhere? Does it look professional? I mean, does it look like a professional company would put that forth? Even things like the name where you have to apply the email or where you send your application. If the application is a generic email, like an @Gmail or @Yahoo or something like that, that's usually a red flag. You want to be looking for a professional email that is confirming that it's going to the company's domain. On the company domain topic, though, and this is where it gets a little more savvy, is that there are scammers who borrow or fraudulently use other companies' names. So they'll say they're hiring from, it's happened to GE, it's happened to the U.S. Postal Service, it's happened to United Healthcare, it's happened to us. Actually, we've had scammers use our name reaching out to people.
Wow.
But they'll say, I'm with United Healthcare, and in some cases, they'll even get really savvy and purchase the domain, a domain that looks and sounds like that one. So United Healthcare, they might do unitedhealthcare-inc.com. And they might actually email you from an email that says, like, Sarah at unitedhealthcare-inc.com. So if, that you always want to kind of pay attention to the domain. Does it look, would United Healthcare actually have the -inc on their URL? Probably not. So Google it, Google United Healthcare and see what comes up and does it match. Those are a little bit more savvy, but and there's more on that. But other things they're common schemes, things where you're asked to spend money up front in exchange for a computer, or where you have to purchase things, but with preloaded software that you have to pay for, and then they'll reimburse you later, or different kind of getting you to give them money. Anything generally with Western Union in an employment outreach is a major red flag.
Wow.
They generally ask you to send money via Western Union, or they ask you for bank account information or any other personal identifying information that is financial, or like your social security number, things like that. They don't all equal scams. We do know legitimate companies who just didn't realize that asking social security number was not kosher. And so if they're on our site, so Flex Jobs, one of the main things we do is we screen all of these jobs out. When I started the company, there was there were around 60 to 70 scams, work from home scams for every one legitimate job. And that number is still high. I don't have the pulse on it exactly. It's probably a bit lower, but it's still very substantial. And we hear from people every day who have gotten scammed from other sites. So it's something to really be on guard for. With Flex Jobs, we have a team of researchers who screen every single job and company that is on our site. So we take all of that out, and we make sure that every single job on our site is professional, legitimate, and has some kind of flexibility.
Yeah, and it's so important to do the research, and which is why I always advocate, like you said, looking into the company, looking into the finer details like the emails and the domains, etc. Some of those things can be, like you said, quite tricky to sort of detect. I've been victim of scams myself that have been not related to jobs but related to other things. So it can be, especially if you're in a rush and you see something that looks really attractive and you kind of respond to it, or you get excited about something. So yeah, you have to look at the finer points as well. But Sarah,
Alex, if you don't mind my saying, we also offer, if anybody comes across a job that they're not sure if it's legit, and they're not on Flex Jobs, they're welcome to email our client services, and we'll let you know what we think. We'll let you know if it would have passed our guidelines. We're always happy to provide that service because we really genuinely want to protect people from scams. It's one of the main reasons why we do our service the way we do.
No, that's wonderful. Is there a particular email that they should email to, or is it just
feedback at FlexJobs?
Feedback at FlexJobs.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's a good one because I know, like I said, there's literally every day I'm speaking to people or reading posts from people who have been victims. So that's really useful to know. I mean, flex jobs as well. It's not just about flex jobs. You've also got workflexibility.org, and you've got remote.co as well. How are they? How do they all work together, or do they work together?
They do work together in certain ways. So when I started Flex Jobs, I found that a good portion of my time could be spent evangelizing remote work and work flexibility. As a business owner, as a small business owner at the time and starting it, I couldn't spend most of my time on that. I had to focus on the business. But I would still integrate it, of course. But kind of fast forward, we got to a threshold point about 5 years ago where I realized we had enough, and we had so many relationships in the field, and so much information and great content that we were at a place we could actually launch a separate site. So we launched 1 million for Work Flexibility, which is the workflexibility.org site, and that is kind of our advocacy arm. So it's really intended as a pay it forward kind of service to, not even service, but to connect the people who both want and need work flexibility with information on what that means. So the people who, are HR organization leaders or HR leaders in companies, it could be politicians who are pushing initiatives forward. It could be any number of things, but to share information on content, books, events, et cetera, that's happening. For example, we have a policy sheet in there that we list by state what initiatives are going on. So it's really more of an awareness driver and, again, an advocacy arm for work flexibility as a whole. A couple years later, we launched remote.co, and this also tied to one of the elements of my job at Flex Jobs, which was that we're a virtual company ourselves. We're a remote company. So when I was starting it that way, it was intentional, because my first company that I had started had been an on-site job, an on-site company, although I had actually worked remotely for a year during that stretch. So I had tuned my experiences back then. But when we launched it as a remote company, there were no resources at that time. Again, this is about 12 years ago. There were no public resources about it, really. And so I just had to kind of conscientiously create it myself. And we did it really well. I'm very proud of our company and our culture. And for example, we've won, Entrepreneur Magazine does a roughly annual culture competition. And for the past three versions of it, we've been in the top 150 company cultures in America. And as a virtual company, a remote company, that's pretty cool.
That's massive.
It actually defies most people's understandings of what a remote company can be, because most people think of remote companies as not having a culture. You don't have an office, you don't know each other, you don't see each other, how can you have a culture? Which is not true. So Remote Co was kind of born out of that I wanted to share that information and, again, pay it forward. And not just for us, but we've interviewed over 130 different companies that are remote focused, either 50% or more of their teams are remote. And we've asked them their best tips and tricks and resources and challenges and the pros and cons of starting remote and switching to remote, or what are the tools they use to manage the remote workers and to communicate, to on-ramp them, to train them, whatever it might be. So we have a great Q&A section on that site that other entrepreneurs or even freelancers can learn on if they want to integrate remote work into their business, or if they want to start a remote company. And then we also have a job board on that site as well that is focused exclusively on remote jobs. It's a much smaller board than what Flex Jobs has. Flex Jobs has many more remote jobs, but Remote Co has a good listing of some of the best ones.
That's great, and I think it's it's important, the information being out there, and not just that, but having information that you can trust as well, because there's so much now. There is so much noise with regards to, not just remote opportunities, just in general, across the internet. So it's good to have those ports of call like Remote Co, like workflexibility.org. So I'd encourage you all to go and have a look. especially if you're new to remote work. And I know there's lots of people, especially within my circles, who are actually looking for sales and marketing opportunities. Sarah, what are the trending? I mean, are there any trending opportunities within those verticals at all that you've noticed?
I mean, there's lots of opportunities, particularly in sales and things like that. Territory sales managers, sales reps, business development, account management. There's lots, both in B2B and B2C. Some of the fastest growing fields that we see are things like marketing. I've already mentioned medical. That is the biggest, most robust generally, and it's still growing. But mortgage and real estate, management, nonprofits. I mean, it runs the gamut. We have jobs across all industries, but there are some that are, I think that there's some that are historically have been very strong: writing, editing, graphic design, development, IT work, those types of areas. But yeah, so I think the most important thing for people to realize is that it's a very viable professional option, no matter what career you're in.
Agreed. And again, another thing is that what I've noticed is that lots of people tend, when they're approaching getting a remote role, I think at the forefront of their mind is the ability to work remotely, to work from home. And that filters through into their application sometimes. And they perhaps forget, the things that you mentioned, like culture and alignment and all those sorts of things. How would you suggest, Sarah, that anybody applying for a remote role, how could they go about aligning themselves so that they can be seen as, a credible candidate when they make their application?
Yeah, I mean, I think it aligns well with most job searching, which comes down to paying attention to the job and company you're applying to and for. You want to read their about page, like, do they talk a little bit about their culture? Because it's quite different if you're applying to a company that is really already heavily remote focused, or has a big statement on their careers page about their dedication to work flexibility and that everyone has it. And then if you're applying to a job that doesn't mention it at all, and you're trying to get it in there too, or they mention it as a minor option, but otherwise don't highlight it. So there, you have to kind of read the landscape a little bit too, and how strong you want to be in it. Generally, you want to use the right keywords. You want to look at what they used for one. That's a good guiding factor. Use their terminology. As general keyword kind of protocol, we recommend people don't use work from home and work at home, instead focusing on words like remote work and telecommute. Or again, if they've used a term like virtual work or something like that, certainly mimic their language is fine. But I think that what I like to do, if I know if you're applying to a job that has remote as a component of it, a clear component of it, I like separating out or highlighting that in your work experience, which of the roles you've worked in prior have been remote as well. So if you have past remote experience, highlight that. I think for a lot of remote companies, one of the questions is, you say you want to work remotely, but do you know what that really entails? And it's not that it's that different than working in an office, but there is self-discipline, time management, proactive communication, an ability to work and a dedication, commitment to working in a focused place, or a way that you can get work done in a really effective manner, versus that you've never done it before. You think it sounds great, but you might have 5 roommates in your small apartment in New York City, and it sounds great, but and that kind of setup is much different, and a potential employer would be more skeptical if they, if you don't have any experience. But getting experience, it's okay. I think that highlighting those skills I mentioned, the proactive communication, self-discipline, time management, maybe whatever IT knowledge you have, like IT support. So you want to be pretty tech savvy if you ideally or familiarize yourself with how to fix minor issues with your computer or setup. Is helpful. So things like that are always helpful to include in your cover letter or potentially on your resume in a section of related skills. And then I would say, if if you're really just starting your search, and you want remote work or flexible work, look for companies that have that. We have a top 100 list of remote companies that we put out. It's actually launching next week. We do that annually, though, so we have those lists that you can look at. We also have a company guide on our site that actually shows over history of our time of knowing what kinds of jobs companies hire for, that we list the top 100 in each category and each location, each state in the U.S. So you can look for those companies. Again, the ones that are more friendly. I think the skills that you have for it, and certainly practice a little bit. If you're interviewing for a remote job, you want to display that you actually are pretty good at using things like video and Zoom or the different platforms that are commonly used with remote work.
And that's great advice. And I always encourage people to use a combination of, use a job board or use a job aggregator like FlexJobs, but also do your own research and perhaps combine the job board with that as well. And you may even use a recruiter, but I mean, recruiters aren't always the main person to go to. But I think I'm a big advocate of self-research, if you see what I mean.
Absolutely, and I would say asking around too. If you have friends, which nowadays most people know somebody who works remotely, or even freelancers. How did you get your job? How did you find it? Doing your due diligence in your own network can really help. And looking for niche websites. I think that if you're in a certain career path, say you're in sports and you want to be in kind of sports manager or something associated with sports, and there's a niche board for sports, that's going to be pretty specific. Certainly look at those boards. And I think the biggest thing is just making sure you're using something that you feel comfortable with and keeping the red flag, looking for red flags for scams, because they happen in almost all industries. And there are, mass majority of job boards do not screen nearly as well as they should. So we do an extensive job of screening, more than anyone else I know, but it's definitely something that everyone should be on guard for.
I know you highlighted Sarah, earlier on, you highlighted some of the actual red flags in terms of the scammy companies, but like you said, your process of vetting those companies is rigorous. Are there any things that you could advise somebody who was doing their own sort of vetting? Is there anything that you could advise that they do in terms of vetting a company at all?
Yeah. Again, I think that domain thing, that making sure that the company's real and that's the first one. So if you're looking at a company and especially if you have any sense of that something might be a little off, if they want to do the interview only by instant message or like chat or by text or in some cases by email, and they won't give company contact information. Like generally they should have some official company information. They should have address, phone number, look that up. A lot of remote companies use services that have PO boxes for their mail because they're remote. They don't have a headquarters. So that, especially for remote work, is not necessarily in and of itself a red flag. If you look up the address of the company and it's a UPS store, for example, which it happens. But I think that combining those red flags is always, just being on guard is the first and foremost if you're screening and vetting these yourselves. I think that the style of interviewing, so if you do get to a phase where they offer you a job, it's something that you feel like it's in line with the role. They're asking you questions that are in line with the role. They're not asking you questions that somebody in an in-person interview wouldn't ask you, or based on your previous interview experience that was legitimate. Is it in line with that? The professionalism is a big thing. Most scammers still nowadays, not all, but most, still will have things like typos or this is a factual statistical thing that will have. It will seem as if English is the second language, which is not a criticism at all. But there's a lot of sloppy language and very off grammar, and it's usually not subtle. It can usually be fairly notable. And again, that's fine. But if it's combined with only wanting to communicate by chat, then you get into some of these like, this is unprofessional, that's a little unprofessional, this is unprofessional, probably not real. So I think that paying attention to those signs are the biggest and most important thing to vet, and Googling it. I mean, I think I've referred to Googling it for the domain name, but also Google the company name and the word scam. See what comes up. Take it with a grain of salt. It doesn't always equal it, but if you start to see a lot of chatter about that, again, big red flag.
Wonderful. Sarah, it's been great. And I just want to finally ask you, what's on the horizon for you, and what's on the horizon for Flex Jobs?
I mean, our goal is and has been to help more people find jobs that better fit their lives, and we're just continuing to move forward in that direction, and to really make as big of an impact in terms of helping people engage. If they want a flexible job, we're trying both on the employer side, we're trying to help employers move forward with that, and on the job seeker side, we're trying to get the word out that there are viable professional options, and put good in the world.
Sounds good to me, and it's been great speaking to you. Thank you so much, Sarah, and of course we'll be keeping an eye on flexjobs.com. Like I said before, I highly recommend you go and have a look. There's so much information there, not just the jobs themselves, but the information to do your research, to understand, how to actually approach your own search itself. So have a look, and I will keep you up to date with how Sarah and Flex Jobs are doing. And all the best with your search. And thank you again, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and a good summit.
Thank you.
Thank you.